June 26, 1977, Elvis's final concert night. As he left the stage, his last words carried a weight no one understood at the time. But in 2024, a diary discovered at Graceland finally revealed why those words held such profound meaning and changed everything we thought we knew about that final performance. The Market Square Arena in Indianapolis buzzed with an electric energy that humid June evening. 20,000 devoted fans had gathered from across the country, many traveling hundreds of miles to witness what they believed would be just another spectacular Elvis Presley concert. The venue itself seemed to pulse with anticipation as concert-goers filled every seat, their excited chatter creating a symphony of voices that echoed through the massive space. Outside the arena, vendors sold Elvis memorabilia, while fans shared stories of previous concerts they had attended. Some had followed Elvis for decades, collecting ticket stubs and photographs like precious treasures. Others were experiencing their first Elvis concert, their eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle unfolding around them. The parking lot resembled a festival, with people of all ages united by their love for the King of Rock and Roll. Inside, the stage crew made final preparations for what would unknowingly become a historic evening. The sound technicians adjusted microphones and tested equipment, ensuring that every note would reach the furthest corners of the arena. Lighting specialists programmed sequences that would illuminate Elvis in all his glory, creating the magical atmosphere that had become synonymous with his performances. The backstage area hummed with nervous energy as band members warmed up their instruments and backup singers practiced their harmonies. Everyone involved in the production understood they were part of something special, though none could have imagined the profound significance this particular night would hold in music history. Elvis himself stood in his dressing room, dressed in his iconic white jumpsuit adorned with golden eagles and intricate beadwork. The costume, which had become his trademark, sparkled under the fluorescent lights. But those closest to him noticed something different about Elvis that evening. There was a contemplative quality to his demeanor, a depth in his eyes that suggested he was processing emotions and thoughts that went far beyond the typical pre-show preparations. Nick Nicopolis, Elvis's personal physician, had been watching his patient with growing concern throughout the tour. The demanding schedule, combined with Elvis's declining health, had created a perfect storm of physical and emotional challenges. Despite his medical advice to cancel or postpone shows, Elvis remained steadfast in his commitment to his fans. Nothing, it seemed, could keep him from giving his all to the people who had supported him throughout his extraordinary journey. As the house lights dimmed and the crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch, Elvis took his position behind the stage curtain. The familiar rush of adrenaline coursed through his veins, the same feeling he had experienced thousands of times before, yet somehow different on this particular night. He could hear the audience chanting his name, their voices creating a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very foundation of the arena. When the curtain rose and Elvis stepped into the spotlight, the crowd erupted in a deafening cheer that lasted several minutes. Fans leaped to their feet, some wiping away tears of joy at seeing their idol once again. The opening notes of his first song filled the arena, and for a moment, all seemed normal in the world of Elvis Presley. The king was back on his throne, commanding the stage with the charisma and presence that had made him a global phenomenon. But as the evening progressed, those who knew Elvis well began to notice subtle differences in his performance. His movements, while still powerful and captivating, carried a weight that hadn't been there in previous shows. Between songs, he seemed to be searching the faces in the crowd, as if memorizing each person's expression and trying to capture the moment in his memory forever. James Burton, Elvis's lead guitarist and longtime collaborator, later recalled feeling an unusual energy emanating from the performer that night. In all their years of working together, Burton had never seen Elvis quite so introspective during a live performance. There was a deliberateness to his interactions with the band, a sense that he was savoring each musical moment more intensely than usual. The Sweet Inspirations, Elvis's backup singing group, noticed how he kept glancing toward the wings between songs, as if he could see someone standing there who was invisible to everyone else. They exchanged concerned glances, but continued to provide the harmonious support that had become their trademark during Elvis's live performances. Their voices blended seamlessly with his, creating the rich, layered sound that audiences had come to expect from an Elvis Presley concert. Throughout the concert, Elvis displayed an extraordinary connection with his audience that went beyond his typical performer-fan relationship. He spoke more intimately to the crowd than usual, sharing personal reflections and memories that surprised even his longtime band members. During one particularly emotional moment, he paused mid-song to address the audience directly. "You know," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system, "music has been my companion since I was just a young boy in Tupelo. It's brought me to places I never dreamed I'd go and introduced me to people I never thought I'd meet. But most importantly, it's connected me to all of you." The crowd responded with warm applause and cheers, sensing that Elvis was sharing something deeply personal. Many fans later reported feeling that he was speaking directly to them, as if he could see into their hearts and understand their individual struggles and joys. As the evening continued, Elvis performed many of his greatest hits with renewed passion and intensity. Each song seemed to carry additional emotional weight, as if he was pouring his entire life experience into every note. When he sang "Love Me Tender," tears glistened in his eyes, and when he performed "Can't Help Falling in Love," his voice carried a vulnerability that touched every heart in the arena. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's controversial manager, watched from the side of the stage with a mixture of pride and concern. He had seen Elvis perform thousands of times, but something about this particular show felt different. There was a finality to Elvis's movements and expressions that made Parker uncomfortable, though he couldn't quite articulate why. The lighting crew noticed how Elvis seemed to be drawing energy from the crowd in a way that was more intense than usual. It was as if he was trying to absorb every moment, every cheer, every expression of love from his fans to carry with him wherever his journey was leading. The connection between performer and audience felt almost spiritual, transcending the typical boundaries of entertainment. Between sets, when Elvis briefly left the stage, those backstage witnessed a man in deep contemplation. Instead of his usual jovial interactions with crew members, Elvis seemed to be in a world of his own, processing thoughts and emotions that remained hidden from view. He would stand quietly, looking out at the audience through gaps in the stage curtain, watching his fans with an expression of profound gratitude and love. Red West, one of Elvis's longtime friends and bodyguards, later described feeling a chill run down his spine during those backstage moments. There was something in Elvis's demeanor that suggested he was saying goodbye, though to what or whom remained unclear. The way he touched objects around him, the lingering looks he gave to familiar faces, and the extra care he took in preparing for each segment of the show all contributed to an atmosphere of solemnity that contrasted sharply with the celebration happening in the arena. Jerry Sheff, the bass player who had performed with Elvis for years, remembered how the musician seemed to be communicating something profound through his music that night. Each bass line felt more significant, each rhythm more meaningful. It was as if Elvis was using the language of music to express emotions and thoughts that words could never adequately convey. Even the sound technicians, typically focused on the technical aspects of the production, found themselves emotionally moved by the intensity of Elvis's performance. The mixing board operator later said that Elvis's voice carried a different quality that night, not weaker, but more honest and vulnerable than they had ever heard before. Every word seemed to come from the deepest parts of his soul, creating an intimacy that reached every corner of the massive arena. The security team, responsible for maintaining order and safety during the concert, reported unusual behavior from the audience as well. Fans seemed more emotional than typical, with many openly weeping during slower songs and displaying an almost reverent attention during Elvis's between-song commentary. It was as if the entire arena had tuned into some deeper frequency that Elvis was broadcasting that night. As the concert progressed into its final segments, the members of Elvis's band began to recognize that they were part of something extraordinary. The chemistry between Elvis and his musicians reached heights that surpassed even their most memorable previous performances. Every musical phrase seemed to carry additional meaning, every improvisation felt inspired, and every moment of silence between songs was filled with unspoken communication. Ronnie Tutt, the drummer whose rhythms had provided the backbone for countless Elvis performances, later described feeling as though he was participating in a sacred ritual rather than simply playing a concert. The beats he played seemed to sync not just with the music, but with some deeper rhythm that Elvis was following. a rhythm that none of them fully understood, but all of them felt. The horn section, usually focused on their specific musical parts, found themselves swept up in the emotional current that Elvis was creating. Each note they played seemed to support not just the songs, but the profound emotional journey that their leader was experiencing on stage. They later reported feeling like they were part of a musical prayer, though they couldn't explain exactly what that meant at the time. Glenn D. Harden, the piano player, noticed that Elvis kept making eye contact with him during certain songs, particularly those that held special significance in the performer's personal history. It was as if Elvis was using these musical moments to communicate memories and emotions that transcended the typical performer-musician relationship. The piano lines seemed to weave through the concert like a narrative thread, connecting past, present, and future in ways that defied explanation. As the concert moved toward its conclusion, Elvis's behavior became even more contemplative and deliberate. He took longer pauses between songs, spending additional time connecting with different sections of the audience. His movements on stage, while still commanding and professional, carried a ceremonial quality that many observers noted, but few understood. During what would become known as his final set, Elvis performed a medley of songs that traced the arc of his career. He began with some of his earliest hits, moving through the soundtrack years and culminating with the powerful ballads that had defined his later period. It was as if he was telling the story of his life through music, creating an audio autobiography for the 20,000 witnesses in attendance. Between each song, Elvis shared brief comments that seemed designed to impart wisdom and express gratitude. He spoke about the importance of following one's dreams, the power of music to heal broken hearts, and the blessing of being able to share one's gifts with others. These weren't his typical stage banter. They carried the weight of a man who had something important to say, and limited time to say it. The audience responded to each comment with thunderous applause, sensing that they were receiving something precious from their idol. Many fans later reported feeling that Elvis was speaking directly to their personal situations, offering comfort and encouragement for challenges they were facing in their own lives. As the final song of the set concluded, Elvis stood at the center of the stage, bathed in spotlights, looking out at the sea of faces that had supported him throughout his career. The arena fell into an expectant hush, waiting for his next move. What happened in those next few moments would puzzle fans and music historians for nearly 5 decades. Instead of his usual energetic exit or immediate encore preparation, Elvis did something that caught everyone by surprise. He walked slowly to the edge of the stage, closer to his fans than he had ventured all evening. The lighting technicians, unsure of what was happening, kept the spotlights focused on him as he raised his hand to quiet the enthusiastic crowd. The arena, which moments before had been filled with cheers and applause, fell into an almost sacred silence. 20,000 people seemed to hold their breath collectively, sensing that something significant was about to occur. Elvis stood at the stage's edge for what felt like an eternity, his eyes moving across the crowd as if he was trying to see every single person who had come to share this evening with him. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, yet somehow carried to every corner of the venue. The sound system, calibrated for his powerful singing voice, picked up every nuance of his words, every emotion behind them. What he said next would be remembered, analyzed, and interpreted for decades to come. "Thank you," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, yet clearly audible throughout the arena. "Thank you for the music." He paused, and many in the audience felt tears beginning to form in their eyes, though they couldn't explain why. "Thank you for letting me be part of your lives, for sharing your hearts with me, for making a poor boy from Tupelo feel like he belonged somewhere special." The crowd remained silent, sensing that Elvis had more to say. He continued, his voice gaining strength. "Remember, love is the only thing that matters in the end. All the success, all the fame, all the material things, they fade away. But love, real love, that lasts forever." Then, in a gesture that seemed almost ritualistic, Elvis touched his heart with his right hand and pointed toward the ceiling of the arena with his left. Those in the front rows could see his lips moving, and some later claimed they heard him whisper a single word, "Jesse." The audience erupted in the most emotional response of the entire evening. Fans leaped to their feet, many openly weeping, applauding not just for the performance they had witnessed, but for the profound human moment they had just shared with their idol. The ovation lasted for nearly 10 minutes, with Elvis standing at the stage's edge, tears streaming down his face, acknowledging the love that was being directed toward him. Backstage, those who had worked closely with Elvis felt a collective chill. Something about his farewell speech, his choice of words, and particularly his whispered reference to Jesse, his twin brother who had died at birth, left them with an unsettled feeling that they couldn't shake. It felt less like the end of a concert and more like the end of something much more significant. Priscilla Presley, though no longer married to Elvis, had maintained a close relationship with him for the sake of their daughter, Lisa Marie. When she later heard detailed accounts of his final words and gestures, she immediately understood their significance. Elvis had often spoken to her about feeling incomplete without his twin brother, about sensing Jesse's presence during difficult times, and about believing that they would be reunited someday. Dr. Nikopoulos, who had been monitoring Elvis's physical and emotional state throughout the tour, was deeply troubled by what he witnessed that night. The combination of Elvis's declining health and his seemingly prophetic farewell created a perfect storm of concern that would haunt the physician for the rest of his life. For 47 years, Elvis's final words and gestures remained a source of speculation and wonder among fans, researchers, and music historians. Various theories emerged about their meaning, ranging from simple expressions of gratitude to more complex interpretations involving spiritual communication and premonitions of death. However, none of these theories could be definitively proven, and the mystery of Elvis's final concert remained unsolved. That changed dramatically in early 2024 when extensive renovations at Graceland uncovered something extraordinary that would forever change how that final concert was understood and remembered. Workers updating the electrical system in Elvis's private suite discovered a hidden compartment behind a panel that had never been removed during previous renovations or investigations. The compartment, carefully sealed and protected from moisture and light, contained several items that had remained untouched since Elvis's death. Among these treasures was a leather-bound diary, written entirely in Elvis's distinctive handwriting, containing entries from his final weeks of life. The diary represented the most intimate and personal insight into Elvis's state of mind during his last days that had ever been discovered. The diary's contents revealed the profound internal struggle Elvis was experiencing in his final period. He wrote extensively about feeling disconnected from the world around him, about the burden of fame and the toll it had taken on his personal relationships. Most significantly, he documented detailed conversations he claimed to be having with Jesse, the twin brother he had never known but had felt connected to throughout his entire life. The entries in the diary painted a picture of a man grappling with mortality, spirituality, and the meaning of his life's work. Elvis wrote about feeling Jesse's presence more strongly in recent months, describing dreams and waking visions where his twin brother appeared to him as a fully grown man who looked exactly like Elvis but possessed a peace and serenity that Elvis had never achieved in his earthly life. One particularly striking entry, dated just 3 days before his final concert, read, "Jesse came to me again last night. He was so clear, so real, that I reached out to touch him. He told me that music is the bridge between this world and the next, that every song I've sung has been preparing both of us for what comes after. He said that when my time comes to leave this world, the music we've shared with people will be what carries us both home." The entry continued with Elvis's growing realization that his earthly mission was nearing completion. Rather than expressing fear or regret, he wrote about feeling a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had eluded him for much of his adult life. He described understanding for the first time that his career had been about more than entertainment. It had been about creating spiritual connections between people and helping them access emotions and experiences that transcended the ordinary. Another significant entry, written the morning of June 26, 1977, the day of his final concert, provided the missing piece of the puzzle that fans and historians had been seeking for nearly 5 decades. In it, Elvis described a particularly vivid dream he had experienced the night before, where Jesse appeared to him with a message that would shape his final performance. According to the diary entry, Elvis's final dream was unlike any spiritual experience he had ever recorded. Jesse appeared to him not as a memory or imagination, but as a fully realized presence who could communicate complex ideas and emotions with perfect clarity. In the dream, Jesse explained that the boundary between life and death was much thinner than most people realized, and that music was one of the few human activities that could actually bridge that gap. Jesse told me that tomorrow night, when I perform, he'll be there with me, Elvis had written. Not just in spirit, but really there, sharing the stage, sharing the music, finally together the way we were meant to be before birth separated us. He said that the audience won't see him with their eyes, but they'll feel him in the music, in the love that flows between us all. The entry continued with Jesse's explanation of why Elvis's final concert would be different from all the others. According to the dream, this performance would serve as a completion ritual, a way of bringing full circle the spiritual journey that had begun when Elvis first discovered his musical gifts as a child. The concert would be both an ending and a beginning, an ending of Elvis's earthly mission and a beginning of a new phase of existence where he and Jesse would be united. Most remarkably, the diary revealed that Elvis's final words to the audience had been carefully planned, based on instructions he received from Jesse in the dream. Every gesture, every phrase, every moment of that final farewell had been choreographed not by Elvis alone, but by both brothers working together across the veil between worlds. With the diary's revelations, Elvis's final concert took on an entirely new meaning that transformed how fans, historians, and spiritual seekers understood both the performance and the man himself. His thanks to the audience wasn't simply gratitude for their support throughout his career. It was recognition that they had been unwitting participants in a sacred process that connected the physical and spiritual realms through the power of music. His statement about love being the only thing that mattered reflected not just personal wisdom gained through years of fame and its accompanying challenges, but spiritual insight received from his twin brother about the true nature of existence. According to the diary, Jesse had explained that material success, fame, and even artistic achievement were temporary phenomena, but the love shared through music created eternal bonds that death could not break. Most significantly, his whispered word, Jesse, and his gesture pointing toward the ceiling revealed that Elvis felt his twin brother's presence so strongly that night that he was acknowledging him publicly for the first time in his career. In his mind, they were performing together, finally united after a lifetime of separation, sharing a stage that existed simultaneously in the physical world and in the spiritual realm. Music historians and Elvis scholars around the world were stunned by these revelations. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a professor of American Cultural Studies at Vanderbilt University, commented that the diary provided unprecedented insight into Elvis's spiritual development, and suggested that his final performance represented one of the most profound examples of art, serving as a bridge between worlds in modern American culture. The diary entries also shed light on why Elvis had seemed so peaceful and purposeful during his final performance. Despite his well-documented struggles with health, prescription medications, and personal relationships, according to his own words, he had found a sense of spiritual completion that transcended his earthly concerns. He understood his role not just as an entertainer, but as a conduit for experiences that could help people access deeper levels of emotion and connection. The revelation that Elvis believed he was performing with Jesse that night explained many of the observations made by his band members and crew. The unusual energy they had sensed, the feeling of participating in something sacred rather than simply entertaining, and the profound emotional impact the concert had on everyone present, all made sense in light of Elvis's belief that he was channeling spiritual presence.